I think I've heard people talking about the concept of whiteness and white people more in the last few weeks as I have in my entire life up to that point combined. And, I've been seeing these posts on social media asking white people to examine what it means to be white. There's an author called Robin DiAngelo who wrote a book called White Fragility, and I haven't read the book, but I've been watching some interviews with her. I've been thinking about this phenomenon of whiteness, and particularly about white guilt. In Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, she describes this phenomenon of how white people get very defensive when you are accusing them of racism or trying to give them feedback on their racist behaviour. They kind of withdraw and feel very defensive. And I identify with that description. I know exactly the feeling that she is describing. But it also reminded me of a video by ContraPoints that I saw a few weeks ago. And since I've brought up ContraPoints and Robin DiAngelo in the same sentence, I suspect a lot of people who are new to this channel probably are getting the wrong idea about this, so bear with me, please. ContraPoints made a video called Cringe, where she identified a few different kinds of cringe, sort of the feeling of embarrassment, sort of secondhand embarrassment that you get when seeing someone embarrassing themselves or doing something that is, it's cringeworthy. I don't know how to describe it. You should watch the video if you want to hear a more scientific description of cringe, but the point is that there was a large portion of that video dedicated to how people cringe more when they see someone they identify with, someone in their own group, doing something bad, doing something embarrassing, because it makes the group look bad. It makes you, as a member of that group, feel embarrassed as a member of that group, feeling like, please don't think that we're all like this. And I think that's what white people experience when we see white people being racist, is that we cringe, not in the sort of normal sense of the term of sort of being embarrassed, but we get defensive and want to prove that we're not one of the racist white people. We're a good white person who is not racist. And I think that's not entirely a bad reaction to have, but I think it is slightly narcissistic. It's a little bit limiting. It gives a special privilege to the bad behaviour done by white people, usually against non-white people. We cringe more at that kind of behaviour that reflects badly on our group when we're interacting with people of other groups. But more than that, it still operates on the assumption that people are separated by races. When you see other white people as people who are in your group, it's kind of racist, right? To identify more with the bad behaviour of other white people than you do with, the behaviour of non-white people. You're identifying with people who are white for no other reason than because they look like you, or they look like your family members, they look like the people in your community, depending on, where you live and what kind of community you live in. And I want to spend this video making one quite simple point, which is that we should cringe when we see other people acting badly, when we see people doing evil, being racist or brutal or cruel to other human beings, or or to animals, or anything. When we see other people being bad, it should make us cringe. We should not want to be like that, and we should try to be the opposite of that, or at least to avoid doing things that are like that. And that feeling should not be reserved just for when you see someone who looks like you doing something like that. The term white guilt, I think, refers to the feeling that white people feel when we think about or acknowledge acts of evil that were done by white people in the past or in the present. Things like the slave trade, the British Empire, the Holocaust, or the killing of George Floyd. I don't think there's much that's wrong about feeling guilty about those things, But I think if we're being logically consistent about it, we should feel just as guilty about the barbarism of Genghis Khan, or the rape of Nanking, or the Ottomans' slave trade, or the Bantu expansion in Africa. We should feel responsible for all acts of evil in the world, past and present, because they were all committed by humans, people who were not very different to you or me. Every human being is capable of being racist, of being brutal and cruel, of being barbaric. It's only because you live in a very sheltered, very moral society that you are permitted to go about your life without being cruel to other people. In another place, in another time, under a different regime, you'd be a very different person, and you may not like the person you'd be. And it's not because you're white, or because you're a man, or because you're a woman. It's because you're human.
Because you're human, and I was human. I am human, still.
And you need to take responsibility for the fact that you are capable of doing some really awful things. And in order to reduce the amount of evil in the world, the most effective way that you can do that is to check yourself and to make sure that you are not doing anything evil. My point is that you don't need to worry about how you look or how your group looks. You just worry about if you're actually doing the right thing. Actually being virtuous is much more important than looking virtuous or making your group look virtuous. Those things don't matter. And that's why I said it was narcissistic earlier, because it's just obsessed with self-image. And when you see somebody else being bad, doing something cruel or racist, or being brutal, you should remember that there but for the grace of God go I. That could be you. In another place, in another time, you would be doing the same thing. And that's all I've got to say for today, so thank you very much for watching. Leave your comments below, as always, and I will see you again soon. Operator, well, won't you help me place this call?